Happy Thanksgiving. Welcome back to Bet to the North. Doug Lesmerises and Tyler Shoemaker. We're doing it Thursday this week instead of Friday. We hope you guys have a great day planned with friends, family, football, and food. Speaking of food, T-Shoe, we are trying to win money for charity for Feeding America, which is a great charity that works with food banks. And so I don't want to be bitter about food literally being ripped out of the mouths of hungry people by Iowa State, but I am bitter.
I'm so bitter. We were texting during that game, and like the most infuriating thing about it is that they played as poorly as they possibly could have played and still had a chance to cover it. I mean, that's how right I felt like we were about how much better they were than Utah. But Rocco Becht, known not carer of hungry kids. I'm just kidding. Don't clip that out.
No, they did. So, and it's one of those. It's like, we just make the bets, and we're betting $5,000 in real money. We're going to give at least $5,000 to Feeding America at the end of the year. If we're ahead, we're going to give whatever we're ahead. And we had Iowa State -7 last week. We were so excited it went from 7.5 to 7. We then heard it was even 6.5 by game time, and in that game, Iowa State gave up an 87-yard pick six. They gave up a punt block for a touchdown, and Jalen Noel, one of the best receivers and punt returners in the country, just dropped the punt that led to a field goal. So that was 17 free points for Utah, and Iowa State won by 3, and Utah otherwise couldn't move the ball. So what are you going to do? That is one, right? A position where a team goes from the red zone to a pick six. Like if it's a 34-yard pick six, it's like, okay, an 87-yard pick six T-Shoe, and it's like, okay, Iowa State's about to go in here and extend a lead, and instead here's a free touchdown from Utah. Like that's about as bad as it gets. That should have been Iowa State going up 14-3. Instead, all of a sudden they were down 10-7.
Yeah, I'm sure what makes me mad about bets like this is that I'm sure there was someone on Utah that was like, man, I was on the sharp side. Like the line moved and Utah covered. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you projected the series of events that took place for Utah to cover that game. Like that's just unrealistic.
Yeah. We also missed our parlay because we had a 4-team parlay, 3 of them on the money line. We hit all those, but then BYU +3 did not happen. And BYU was trying to come back at the end and threw an interception on the last drive. I was disappointed with how BYU played. They got down early to Arizona State, but that wasn't that far off. We did hit the Michigan State, Notre Dame, Syracuse part of that, but you don't get credit for hitting 3 or 4 on the parlay. But
nope. But the one bet that I didn't have a part of last week. So I'm just saying.
Were you proud of me, Dad?
I was so proud. I was watching that game. I think if I recall, they were playing at the same time as Ohio State. So once Ohio State had the game in hand, I switched it to the Florida Ole Miss game, and I was rooting. I was texting with my brother who's a Florida fan. And I was rooting for Florida because I wanted it for him, and I wanted it for you and for the show.
Yes. T-Shoe, your little boy's all grown up. This is a cats in the cradle situation. I'm branching out. I'm growing as a bettor. So we cashed that, which actually made us ahead on the plus money swings last week. And then you and I each went 2-1 on our best bets. So we were in range. It wasn't like a terrible week, right? Like we hit some picks, and the ones we lost, we were in range on. $500 plays. We started off 3-0, and I was imagining an undefeated year. We're now 7-6 on the $500 plays. We've had some tough beats lately. We're still up $327 on the $500 plays. The plus money swings, we're actually ahead more than we are on the $500 plays. We're up over $600 on those. And our best bets, we're both above water on the best bets for the year. You're 23-21. I'm 20-18. And overall, starting from a $5,000 bankroll, we're up almost $1,000 overall. So it's 59-49-07. Like we're still winning. This is still pretty good. It's not as good as it once was, but we feel good about the bets this week. And again, right? We're in range on stuff. I don't think we're leading people down terrible paths. I hope there were Is this a thing to hope for? I hope there were people who bet Iowa State last week with us who were losing money, but like, you know what? Those guys had the right idea as I lost my $5 because of them, right? So at least we could lose together with the right idea, which is the best way to lose.
I think people understand. I mean, other than that 1 week, there really hasn't been any type of like, you guys are idiots. You don't know what you're talking about. Like we had the 1 week where, I got a little defensive, but other than that week, I mean, I think people understand like some of these beats that we've had, it's that's betting. The weird thing about this, about the way kind of our trajectory has gone this year with the $500 bets, we started off really hot and then it's, kind of evened out as the year's gone on. My personal bets, not on the show, have kind of gone the other way. Like early in the year, I was just kind of trading money back and forth every week. And then 3 of the last 4 weeks, I've just gone nuclear. And as long as I have a good week this week, I will be at more units in college football than I was in WNBA, which is like insane. So it's been like the inverse for my personal bets as to how the show's gone. So, but when you match that together, I've had a good season. So I like it.
Okay. I like the bet this week because here's the thing, Tishu, is man, this given points. Given points. Why can't we just pick winners? Why isn't that good enough for people? But when you settle on a game that is not an underdog money line play, that it's just a money line play, picking a game, it just removes the angst of, I feel like I have the better team, but am I sure they're going to cover? It removes the angst of what happened with Iowa State last week. So our $500 bet this week is that. And we're given a little extra juice. Kansas is a 1.5 point favorite on the road at Baylor. So you could either bet Kansas at -1.5 at -110 juice, or you can just take the money line. And Kansas just has to win. All of a sudden, if they win by 1, you don't lose at -115. So we took it on the money line. Kansas at Baylor, -115. Baylor has 7 wins. Kansas has 5. Kansas has won 3 straight games against ranked teams, and they're trying to make a bowl. But Baylor's fine. Baylor was in last place in the Big 12 earlier in the year, and they've played well lately. But I think Kansas is playing like a top 25 team. And I don't think they're going to be stopped in their bowl pursuit by Baylor. So all they have to do is win. I really like this. But you did direct us toward the money line on this. What's the thinking of when it's such a 1.5? How do you decide whether to give the points or just go the money line?
Yeah, well, like everything else in my life, it's going to be based on my number. And I project Kansas -1. So full disclosure, I bet Kansas +1.5 on Sunday because Baylor opened as a favorite here. So I took the points with Kansas early on. So when we were talking through this, I project 1. Is there really a difference between 1 and 1.5? Not really, but for only -115, I said, let's just take the money line because I do think Kansas is going to win. But the Big 12's been weird. I mean, we saw the end of that BYU game last week. Like, there's definitely a scenario out there where Kansas wins this game by 1. So, I mean, how mad would we be if that happened and we laid 1.5? So I said, let's just take the money line. I do think they're going to win. Kansas, over the last month, has kind of turned out to be who I thought they would be in the preseason because if you recall, I was really high on them in the preseason. I bet their season win total over, which went down the drain in like September. Over the last month, they've been 10 points better than Baylor. And as you mentioned, Baylor's actually played some of their best football over the last month too. They kind of hit another gear, but even despite that, Kansas has been 10 points better by my numbers over the last month. So I definitely like the way Kansas is headed. I agree with you. The vibe, the non-number stuff here, like getting bowl eligible, I think is huge. I definitely think that matters to Lance Leipold for sure. So I think Kansas is definitely going to win this game.
And listen, you can do a lot with statistics, but to me, to splice off the beginning of the season for Kansas when Jalen Daniels was turning the ball over like crazy and they were losing a bunch of 1-score games, and really look at them in the last month, as you just said, that's what matters. And this happens to a lot of teams. Florida is like this, right? There's a lot of teams who are really completely different teams in November than they were in September. And so while I understand, of course, having numbers that take everything into account. Your numbers are so great. It's like you always talk about this. Well, there's the numbers if you look at the whole year. There's the numbers if you just look at this splice of time. This is a splice of time team. So while your overall numbers aren't really different than the line, that like this 10-point thing that you're talking about, that makes me feel great, Tishu.
Yeah,
because that's who they are.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before, where people have to understand, like, setting a line and making a projection on a game aren't necessarily the same thing. Like, I think you just hit on it. Like, okay, setting this line, Kansas -1, -1.5 is a fair line based on every data point we have on them. But to make a projection on the game, like I said, they've been 10 points better than Baylor. So, like, if Kansas wins this game by 10 points, like, I'm going to be like, yeah, that's right in line with where these teams have been over the last month. Which, you know, some would argue is the most important thing. So those are kind of two different exercises. So I hope people understand that, because so when I put out my numbers, it's like, okay, this is the full body of work.
Yeah.
So I get questions all the time, like, well, your numbers show a huge edge on this game. Why didn't you bet it? And it's like, well, because when I look at how these teams are trending, it's kind of going the other way. So like that to me, that's contradictory information, so I'm not going to bet it. So like, I think you have to take all of that into account when you're selecting a bet.
Yeah, the thing I like most about how you do this is that your numbers provide a baseline, but then you always have like a second set of numbers, or you're reading the trends in the market, and you usually don't go on something unless you have multiple reasons for doing it.
Sure.
You're not a one reason guy, and that you have a system that creates an underlying set of facts, a baseline, where my baseline is the SEC can cram it, which is not a terrible baseline, but you have to have a base, and then from there you build, right? But you stack information on top of information. So in this situation, your number is about where the market number is on this, right? -1, -1.5, which makes it possible to bet. Okay, like you're not way different than the line.
Right.
And now you're stacking your last month numbers on top of that. And it's like, okay, now I like this more. Now let's go ahead. I just want people to understand the work, Tishu. Numbers on numbers. That's like me. Vibes on vibes, right? It's not just
we need t-shirts that say that, like, you know, like the I'm with stupid t-shirts. We need that, but just like numbers on numbers, vibes on vibes. We definitely need that.
Kansas did not win these last 3 games to blow their bowl shot against Baylor. They just didn't. That's not how Lance Leipold rolls.
Yeah, and I think another point worth making here on this game as we wrap this up, there was a time in this season where you kind of thought Dave Aranda might get fired. And, you know, maybe there was a scenario out there where he's coaching for his job in this game. Baylor's come out and said, like, we're running it back. So, like, not that he doesn't want to win, but, like, I don't think there's that added urgency there for him to get this game. I think there's way more urgency on the Kansas side, plus the numbers back them up, as we said.
Yeah. Baylor already saved its season, to Dave Aranda's credit. Kansas is still trying to get to this bowl. So there's a lot here. I really like this bet. We're doing another plus money swing on a parlay, and this is not a huge plus money. It's only plus 139, but man, do we think these are 3 really solid money line bets, Tishu. We are taking Texas to beat Texas A&M. I think Texas is a 5.5 point favorite. We're taking Notre Dame to beat USC. Notre Dame's like a 7.5 point favorite. And we're taking Tulane to beat Memphis on Thursday night. One of the reasons I like this is the only college game on Thursday. So as you listen to this Thursday morning, if you want a little Thanksgiving action on college football, drop Tulane in this 3-team money line parlay at plus 139. We were kind of searching how to piece this together, and there were things we could have done. You know, Tulane is a 2-touchdown favorite. Do you want to give that? Do you want to try to boost up the numbers? And then we were like, you know what? It's just plus money. Plus 139 is plus money. Let's just do this. We feel like this is a lock. Are you allowed to say that on a show? That this is that's that like bad. This is a guaranteed winner.
God, Tulane's losing now.
But you and I were talking about when the lines came out for Notre Dame USC, we were like, oh, should we bet Notre Dame right away? Because I think maybe there were 6.5 at that point. Is that right? And now it's moved to 7.5. And it's like, as we've talked about a lot, your numbers really like Notre Dame. The idea that Notre Dame with the playoff spot on the line is going to go lose at USC and that dysfunctional team, I don't believe in, but that 7.5 versus 6.5, we backed off that from a $500 perspective. But money line, and Texas A&M is a mess. They just lost to Auburn. Like, does that mean they're more motivated? I don't know. This is a rivalry game. Texas hasn't played a very tough schedule. I think Texas is better. So I like this. Money line only. Just win these games, these three teams. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I love this. I mean, I know it's not, plus 350 like some of the other ones we've given out, but I mean, we could have stacked more teams on this and gotten those odds juiced up, but it's like, do you want to win, or do you want to have a nice big plus number? So I do feel really good that all of these are going to win. I think all of these teams are really incentivized to go out and win. I wish. I just knew when we were talking about the Notre Dame game on Sunday, like I knew that 7 was not going to be around. We could have bet it on our company account. We could have got it at 7, but I knew our audience was not going to be able to get it at 7 by this point. So that's why we went with the money line here. I did bet Notre Dame minus 6.5 on Sunday. I think they're probably going to cream USC, but Tulane, of all these teams, Tulane I think definitely is the most incentivized to just go out and like roll Memphis.
Yes.
I think they need the style points as badly as anyone, and I think they'll get them. They've played awesome over the last month. I mean, they're like borderline top 10 level over the last month in my numbers. So I think Tulane's going to crush Memphis. We talked about Notre Dame. Texas, this feels like one because I've heard so many people say, I think Texas A&M is going to beat Texas. And like when I hear that and then I see my numbers are like heavy on Texas, I'm like, okay, Texas doesn't play here. I bet Texas minus 5.5. I think Texas A&M is going to be a very public underdog, which again is not the end all be all, but it does. When I hear a lot of people say one thing and my numbers say another, like that's generally a good sign. Similar tangent, but similar with Clemson, South Carolina. We talked about that briefly. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are saying South Carolina might be Clemson. My numbers are heavy on Clemson. So, just keep that in mind as we go into the weekend. But I like this. I think this is going to cash. Even plus 139, not the longest odds, but I mean, I think this is a winner for sure.
And so people understand the context with Tulane. Tulane and Army have clinched appearances in the American Athletic Conference title game, but Tulane is battling Boise State to get that group of 5 playoff spot. So Boise State, if you assume Boise State wins the Mountain West and you assume Tulane's going to go beat Army and win the American, Boise State's ahead right now, substantially ahead in the college football playoff rankings. But if Boise struggles and Tulane looks like a machine, like this is what you're talking about, Tishu, that Tulane needs to win, but win convincingly, and they have a spot to themselves. They have the entire college football landscape on Thanksgiving night. They want to put on a show. So we're just telling you that we took this on the money line, but I think if you want to make a play at Tulane minus 14, there's reasons to do that maybe as well, right?
Yeah, and that's one, like my numbers would not indicate that. I think my number on that game is Tulane minus 9. But like, again, that's one of those things where like you have to use your head and say like, okay, is everything we know from an unquantifiable standpoint, like, does that justify taking them minus the 14? And I personally think it does. Like if I had to play a side in that game, there's no way I would bet against Tulane in that game.
Yeah. So if you want to bet $2, so you have something going on Thanksgiving night, as we look at it right now, it's actually down to minus 13.5 Tulane. So this is our parlay, and we divided up the $100 plus money swing because I'm doing another SEC upset. Is it okay? This is another SEC upset. You're not sure about this, but you believe in your boy. Is that fair to say? You believe in your boy.
You have earned the right to branch off and throw $25 on whatever you want.
Okay. Vanderbilt money line. Vanderbilt beats Tennessee plus 310. Last week, Florida was plus 320 to beat Ole Miss. So we'll make like a $25 bet. You're making $100 on this. I just think they have a shot. Vanderbilt hasn't won this in a long time, but I do think Tennessee is a one-sided team a little bit. We know how good the Tennessee defense is, but Nico Imalieva certainly has the ability to do it, but Diego Pavia has been very good at times for Vanderbilt this year. And this is just one of those things, Tishu, where this is a rivalry, where this is in range this year when often this is not. I think in the history of this, it's something like 80-20, Tennessee over Vanderbilt. This is a rivalry that's not really a rivalry. And all the pressure is on Tennessee here. And Vanderbilt is completely playing with house money. And if Tennessee loses, they probably aren't going to make the playoff. And if they do win, they are definitely going to make the playoff. So this is a play-in game for Tennessee against a Vanderbilt team that beat Alabama and played Texas within one score, and it's at Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt is getting 11 in this game if you just want to take the points, but I took the plus money swing at plus 310. What do your numbers actually say about this?
Yeah, I've got Tennessee covering, which is why I was out on this when you ran it by me. But again, my numbers were out on Florida last week, so I'm not always right. I've got Tennessee minus 13 in this game.
Okay.
But again, rivalry week. I mentioned this, I think, maybe early in the season or last year. This week is one more than any other week that like I would be more open to going against my numbers because there's just so much intangible stuff with this week that just cannot be quantified in my numbers. So if my numbers are close, I'm not going to go against it if I had like a touchdown of value or something like that. But if my numbers are even close and I feel like, hey, this team has the vibes, as you say, like I am way more open to doing that. So this would be one of those games. I didn't bet Tennessee, even though my numbers indicated to do so, because I do think there might be something here with Vanderbilt. And let me ask you this. If you had to pick a quarterback in this game, who would you take?
Yeah.
Like right now to go win a game on Saturday, who would you pick? Diego Pavia or Nico Iamaleava?
Yeah, I'd probably pick Pavia because Nico and some like you watched that Tennessee Alabama game and Nico and Jalen Milroe were just like missing receivers all game, right? So, and Tennessee has played with fire a bunch, and I don't want to like. It doesn't mean I think Vanderbilt should make the playoff, but like Pavia is a gamer and he's shown up in big games. And this makes it a historic to beat Alabama and Tennessee in the same year for Vanderbilt. Like this guy, they built a statue of this guy.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot for Vanderbilt and a lot against Tennessee from the vibe standpoint. So I think it's a nice little vibes play if you're in the mood. And who doesn't like rooting for more SEC chaos, right? So drop $3 on it at plus 310 and see what happens. Take your little swing. You guys have extra money from the Florida win last week because I know you rode with that. Guess what we did this week, Tishu? For the first time all season, we bet more than $600. So we always bet $500 on the big play. Then we bet another 100 on these underdog swings. But we have a special game that you and I agreed on. It wasn't a $500 bet, but we were both going to make it a best bet. So we said, let's pull it out of the best bets and bring it into the real world, right? We're stepping through or stepping it, whatever, into the closet. We're under the stairs with Harry Potter. I don't know, like the magic stuff. We're through the mirror. We're through the looking glass with the Lane Kiffin special, the Cram It special. We're going to do an extra $100 play. Ole Miss minus 26 versus Mississippi State at minus 108 on Friday. Otherwise, I'm not watching this game because there's too many other good Northern games on Friday. This is a 3:30 game on Friday. This is a last gasp, I think, from a vibe standpoint. If there is going to be a 3-loss team that has a chance to make the playoff, Ole Miss wants to be in that conversation. And they've got to go show that the committee should ignore their 3 goofball losses otherwise and put them in. And I think they are going to take it to Mississippi State in this Egg Bowl. So that's the vibes case for it. What's the math case for it?
Yeah, there's definitely a math case to be had. I've got Ole Miss minus 28.5. And
okay,
I bet this myself. I bet it. I think I got it at 25 on Sunday. Like I think they're going to just early and often it's going to be like that scene on Christmas Story when Ralphie finally just has enough and it just gets on top of the bully and just is punching until his mom pulls him off. I think that's going to be Lane this weekend on Friday. I think, and Mississippi State like kind of sucks. So like there's a big talent disparity here. And when you have a talent disparity and the more talented team is really motivated to really put it to you, like it's coming, Mississippi State. It's coming.
Can we make that Lane Kiffin's nickname now? Ralphie? Hey, Ralphie, Why did we lose to Kentucky? Why did we lose to Florida? Why did we lose to LSU? Our efficiency metrics are through the roof, and we have 3 losses. It's your fault, Jeff Lebby. 52-13, right? Yeah. Ralphie. Yeah, it's coming. Ralphie. You know what Lane Kiffin did this year? With a very talented, transfer-laden team with very high efficiency metrics on both sides of the ball. He shot his eye out. His eye out, tissue.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Ralphie. Oh, Ralphie. All right. We feel bad for Ralphie. Ralphie, the dog, came in and took the turkey off the table, right? Where to feel the hounds are. Ralphie came down the slide and Santa. If I don't have the ability to do that, but if somebody wants to put Lane Kiffin's face on Ralphie in every scene of Christmas Story, we certainly would welcome that. Oh, Ralphie. Okay, so we're betting on Ralphie in the Egg Bowl. Other best bets, because again, we both were 2-1 last week in the best bets. Let's start with your other best bets T-shoe. Your first one is a Northern underplay. Illinois Northwestern under 44 at -110. This is in Wrigley Field. And the Northwestern offense, what's the word I'm looking for? Non-functional lately? What is it about this that makes you like this under?
Yeah, this is kind of both a math and a vibes play. I project 42.5. So, we are under this. 44 is not like a key number, but I think it's like the 6th most landed on total in college football. So, we're getting some value on the number here, but also reading the market, it opened 44.5 at Bookmaker, which is what I consider the sharpest book. Quickly bet down to 43.5, and it has not come up at Bookmaker back to 44. It has stayed below 44 because they know the sharp action that they take. If they touch 44 again, they're going to get hammered again. So that's pretty telling, just reading the market. This also can have some weather impact. It's going to be really cold, just 24 degrees with 15-mile-an-hour winds. So I don't know if there's going to be a ton of passing game going on there. To me, this just feels like, I've said this before, this just feels like old school Big Ten football. I think this is going to be pretty low scoring. And like you said, the Northwestern offense is non-functional and the Illinois offense has been inconsistent. They've had games where they've, kind of gone crazy, and then they've had games where they've done nothing. So you don't really know what you're going to get with them. But I do think the Northwestern defense is solid enough and the Northwestern offense is bad enough consistently that this game should stay under the 44.
Yeah, the Northwestern defense played pretty well in the first half against Michigan last week and then got rolled in the second half. And David Braun and Northwestern, they're kind of having a reevaluation of everything they're doing. And they're just not going to figure it out on offense this year. But Northwestern's mad about how they've played for the last month. They've lost 4 of their last 5, and their only win is an overtime game against the worst team in the Power 4. So if they're going to rise up at all in a rivalry game, it's on defense. So their way to make this a game is to try to keep this in the 20s, right? Or Illinois steamrolls them, but then that means Northwestern doesn't score at all, and it's 38-0, and you hit the under. Or it's like 21-16. So again, 2 paths to an under here. I like this bet. Georgia Tech, this is another under. Landis and I talked about this game this week. We think Georgia Tech plus 19.5 is interesting. Under 54.5 is a little bit, feels like a nod to that. Did you think about Georgia Tech? What does your line say about this game? Georgia Tech minus 19.5. And sometimes, right, if you're thinking about an under, that to me often is related to the underdog, that you don't necessarily think that this is going to be a Georgia, 52-17 splattering. So Georgia Tech, Georgia under 54.5 for you.
Yeah, my line's 20.5, so I'm right there kind of with the market. But again, one of those where I wouldn't bet on Georgia to cover a 20-point spread in this game. I think it is going to be low scoring. I think Georgia Tech, I talk about this a lot, where there are teams and coaches that you want to bet on as an underdog, but you don't want to bet on them as a favorite. And Georgia Tech's kind of like that. I think in this spot, Georgia Tech is dangerous and can do enough to play keep away and that sort of thing with Georgia. I project 49 here, so pretty good value on the total. Georgia's last 4 big games, so Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida, those games have averaged just 46 points. So in these latest high stakes games, Georgia has kept it low scoring. And in Georgia Tech's last 4 games, those games are averaging just 45 points per game. So both of these teams, and even against Miami, that total was only 51. And Miami's offense is light years better than Georgia's, I think. So the fact that Georgia Tech was able to keep that game under what this total is, and Georgia's defense is way better than Miami's. So I just think from a game script standpoint, which we talk about a lot, I think Georgia Tech definitely has to keep it close. And Georgia, I don't know that they're super incentivized to, try to run it up here. Like I think as long as they win, they're going to play for an SEC championship, I think, and be in the playoff, if nothing else. So I don't think they need a ton of style points here. So I think Kirby would be happy to get out with a win. So I think this is like, I don't know, 31-17 or something like that. Like I don't think it's going to be, a scoreboard explosion like the Georgia Mississippi State game, like where that was just like nonstop. I don't think that's this at all.
You sent this at 54. No, you said at 54.5. It was 54 on DraftKings. I found it at 54.5 on FanDuel. Is 54 a key number at all? If people are trying to bet this, should they shop for the 54.5, or is 54 fine for this under?
54 is fine. 55 is like the most key number. So like if you could get a 55 instead of that, obviously that would be great. But between 54 and 54.5, not a ton of difference there.
Okay. Sounds good. Your third one is another under, also at 54.5. Missouri, Arkansas, under 54.5 at -108.
Yeah, both of these teams, I bet the Arkansas under last week, that cashed. Missouri's a team I've bet on unders quite a bit this year. These teams just don't really do a whole lot of. I mean, Arkansas has had, I think, one game that went kind of crazy in high scoring, but for the most part, like these are pretty low scoring teams. I project 50.5 here, and looking at their games against Power 4 teams, their games are averaging just 50 points. So obviously under that number, and that's including Arkansas's game against Ole Miss that had like 1 million points. So, if you were to remove that game from the equation, it'd be even, much lower, it'd be in the 40s. So Missouri as a favorite, though, 5-2 to the under by 5.5 points per game. So when Missouri's kind of controlling the tempo of a game, they prefer to play slow and keep it low scoring. So I think that's a huge part of this. I think this definitely stays under 54.5.
And then your last one is who is this team game? It's Jacksonville State, which always confuses me. That's not the school that Deion Sanders was the coach at, because that's Jackson State. This is Jacksonville State, +1.5 at Western Kentucky. I don't know. Secret. But the secret bets, these are the blind follow T-Shoe because you trust T-Shoe bets. There is nothing that you as a normal college football fan can do to double check this. This is a trust the experts game. So let it rip on Jacksonville State.
I can't believe you didn't agree to this for the $500 bet. I know you're very, intimately their personnel and scheme. And so I project Jacksonville State -2.5 here. I think they're probably going to close as a favorite here. We've seen the line kind of tick their way. I bet them at +2.5 early in the week. Western Kentucky just lost to Liberty, who actually kind of sucks, and is like, that's one of the bigger stories of the group of 5 this year, is like Liberty's demise after being awesome last year, returning basically everybody, and somehow they suck this year. Jacksonville State's my number 1 power rated team in Conference USA. And again, over the last month, because I think the reason Jacksonville State's undervalued in the market is because early in the year, they kind of had some quarterback personnel issues. Like they weren't sure which way they were going to go. I think they were playing 2 quarterbacks early in the season. Once they got that sorted out, over the last month, they've been 10 points better than Western Kentucky. They've really got it figured out and have been playing better. They just beat Sam Houston State, who's a good Conference USA team, by double digits last game. So I think Jacksonville State's going to win this game outright. So I am happy to take the 1.5 here.
Okay. So those are the 4 T-Shoe best bets. Again, he's up on his best bets this year. I also have 4 best bets. These are all just northern things that I think. First one is Syracuse. I do think Syracuse at home against Miami is going to be a shootout. And in a shootout, I'll take 10.5. I picked Syracuse to win this game on our Tuesday show. I think there's backdoor cover possibilities here that Syracuse is not going to let up the entire game. Syracuse has a goofy loss to Stanford. They have a game at Pitt where Kyle McCord threw 5 picks, and that game was just an outlier, I think. And then they lost out Boston College. But like to get this one at home, all the pressure is on Miami in this game. Miami, if they win, they're in the ACC championship game. If they lose, they're not. This is very much, I think, it's huge playoff implications. I'm not sure that it's a play-in, but it's like an opportunity play-in for Miami. And so, and Syracuse can just let it rip. So I think it's high scoring both ways. What do you have math on this, T-Shoe? Like Syracuse is a bit of a goofy team, but they score and they they have like a nice win over Georgia Tech this year. They went and won at UNLV in an overtime game. That's a nice win. Like they're not afraid to hang in a game like this. And again, Miami's played a bunch of close games. I'm not sure Miami is that much better than Syracuse. So 10.5 feels like a lot to get for me.
So we are actually opposite on this. I bet Miami minus 10.5 on Sunday, which it's come back down because when I bet it was starting to go to 11.5 at some spots. And now it's back to the 10.5. I project 16.5 here, which was enough for me to pull the trigger on Miami.
Okay.
I don't disagree with your analysis of that. I just have a really hard time betting on Syracuse because Kyle McCord is just like so boom or bust. Like if they come out and win this game, I wouldn't be surprised. And if he throws 3 picks and Miami wins by 27, I'm also not going to be surprised. So I think there's just kind of it is hard to get a grasp of Syracuse, but I do think Miami has to be sick of everyone telling them how fraudulent they are, because I know every week when I post my rankings graphics, I have someone say like, why is Miami that high? They suck. They're fraudulent. So I think at some point Miami's going to turn Ralphie a little bit and just be like, all right, you want to see what Cam Ward can do? So I like Miami here. Like this would not be, again, like I didn't make this a best bet. I did bet it personally, but I'm on Miami here.
I think you might have created that phrase to turn Ralphie. I think this team's going to turn Ralphie this week. Own that. Let's make that on a t-shirt. Yeah. I thought about this as a plus money line bet, plus 295, but I like Vanderbilt substantially better here. And the other thing here, this is such an orange collision. Orange in both these teams, and Dabo Swinney and Clemson have a lot invested in Syracuse beating Miami to get Clemson into the ACC title game, and they're orange too. Man, orange explosion. My next best bet, I did go ahead and pull the trigger on Notre Dame. So 7.5, not in love with it, but I'll take it. Minus 7.5 at USC. Would you still bet this? Again, you bet it at 6.5. Would you advise people to bet it at 7.5, or should they be cautious?
If I had to make a play, I would still play it at 7.5. I project 11.5. So, there is still value there. It's just out of principle and process. Like it's hard knowing that 6.5 is available for me to then bet 7.5. So that's kind of why I didn't put this in. But I do love Notre Dame. Like, God, if nothing else, for my sake, I hope they cover this game, because that's the other team that every time I post my graphic, because Notre Dame is my number 2 power rated team, and I've taken a lot of heat for that. So I hope they come out and roll USC just to kind of vindicate TSI a little bit, which they have been. They continue to cover numbers, and they got backdoored by Virginia a couple weeks ago, but they continue to cover. I think they continue to be underrated because, again, we talk about the NIU game. I get it. It matters for the resume. It does not matter for their power rating as far as I'm concerned. They've been a totally different team since then. So I think they're going to roll.
Yeah, I think they're going to roll too. So I do feel good about this bet. This next one, I actually feel really good about it. Cincinnati plus 3.5 at home versus TCU. This is another motivation game. Cincinnati's lost 4 in a row, but 3 of them were on the road to very good teams: Colorado, Iowa State, and Kansas State. I don't really hold those against Cincinnati. That to me is more about those 3 teams doing what they need to do. The last 2 weeks, they caught Iowa State and Kansas State right at moments where those teams needed to stand up to sort of save their seasons, and they did. I think Cincinnati is very competent. I think Corey Kiner is great. I think Brendan Sorsby is a dangerous quarterback. I think they can get up pressure up front and make it difficult on teams, and they need to win this game to make a bowl. And TCU is already in a bowl, and I just think because Cincinnati is on a 4-game losing streak after starting 5-2. I think they're a little undervalued here. I would be like very surprised if they lose this game at home to miss a bowl. They're not who I thought they were. And I think, again, results matter, but I don't think this 4-game losing streak is a sign of a Cincinnati team that's given up or fallen apart. I just think their schedule got more difficult. And they had a crazy game against West Virginia where they dominated 90% of the game and had a couple key turnovers. It was kind of like the Iowa State-Utah game, but they lost that game to West Virginia. So I really like Cincinnati here. And I don't think this is wishful thinking. I think Cincinnati, if you think they're falling apart, they're not. I think they're still pretty good, and I think they're going to win at home, and they're getting more than a field goal.
Yeah, and I think that's important that you point out that they haven't given up, because that's something you got to be on alert for, especially this week. The numbers agree with you. I've got TCU. I basically made this game a toss-up. I've got TCU minus a half point here, so the math aligns with you. So definitely getting the 3.5 is huge. Cincinnati, I cannot get a feel for them. Every time I bet their side or total, I cannot get a handle on them. So I'm probably not betting this, but if I was to take a side, it would be Cincinnati. The math definitely agrees with you.
Yeah. And then the last one is one we talked about. I did take the 19.5 with Georgia Tech at minus 110. I might like your under bet better, but what's the thing that I like about this? Oh, yes. It's betting against Georgia. Come on. It's the holidays. Just isn't it worth $2 to have a reason to root against Georgia? And every time something bad happens to Georgia, you get a little, that felt good, right? And every time Georgia Tech does something well, normally you wouldn't care. And you think, oh man, I really love Aaron Philo. I didn't know who he was until 15 minutes ago. Now he's my favorite player because he just shoved it up Kirby Smart's you-know-what. So, like, is that not sometimes, Tishu, it's not about winning. It's how the bet makes you feel. Bet $2 on Georgia Tech plus 19.5.
I think this game potentially could offer some live value. Like if Georgia scores first and you can get Georgia Tech at 21, I definitely would take that. If I could get 3 full touchdowns with Georgia Tech, I definitely would do that. So I'm kind of, when I go into each week, I kind of have games where I'm like, all right, I need to really pay attention to these like first drive or two to try to get in live. And this is one of those games where like, all right, hopefully Georgia scores first and I can get on Georgia Tech live. And also, if you like my underplay, you can also, get some more value on the under there as well.
Oh, that's really good. That is really good advice. Friday, 7:30. So you're kicking back Friday night. Maybe you go to a movie in the afternoon, do some Black Friday shopping, and then just tell your family, I have to be in front of the TV by like 7:45 because if Georgia scores, I'm going to bet Georgia Tech live. They'll understand.
I'm gonna need you to text me because I'm gonna be driving to Columbus from Greenville Friday night. So keep me posted. Like, Georgia Tech touchdown. I'm gonna pull over and lock in a bet real quick.
Yeah, it'd be one of those. Depending what state you're in, it's like you just have it on the app. Can you do it? Like you might have to like speed up and get to a state that has the live betting. So it's like you can't go into a state. We're about to cross a state border, but we can't because I need to live bet Georgia Tech. These are the things we do for gambling. But isn't it?
I should be in Ohio by that time.
Okay.
I just won't be to Columbus yet. So I'll be ready to lock and load.
Okay. 7:30. You guys lock this in. So this is one of those, again, it's like you can put on your hat, non-ironically, root for Georgia to score on its first possession, and then put it on ironically and be like, oh, Kirby, I'm betting against you. Right. So it's the same hat, but context matters. Those are our bets on Bets of the North. We will be back next week. We're not going to force it in conference championship weekend, Tishu. Like, we're not going to make ourselves make a $500 bet if there's not something we feel great about, but we're going to look at the slate for conference championship games. We'll talk about some opportunities there. And if we like something, we will bet real money on it. But it's not the same thing as having 80 games to choose from when you have 9 games to choose from. So this is real money. We're not going to just toss it around. But the other thing we'll do next week is we're going to go back to our preseason show where we had our preseason plays, over, under, win totals, that kind of thing. We're going to see how we did because the regular season will be over. So those bets will be done. How smart or not so smart were we? There is definitely one bet that I made based on your advice in the preseason about a team that I knew nothing about that cashed. So we'll talk about that. Because again, what's better than that? Follow the experts.
Well, I'm nervous because I'm pretty sure I gave out Kansas and Missouri, and those were dead like on arrival. So I'm curious to see how that show goes because I don't remember what I gave out back then. So I'm going to be learning along with the rest of you. I'm curious.
Wait till we revisit my Oklahoma and West Virginia picks. Oh my God. People will be going hungry. All right. Thanks to everybody for joining us here on this Thanksgiving morning. We will be back Saturday night, 11 p.m., a post-game show. I will be sprinting from the Iowa State-Kansas State game back to my hotel. I will also be at Iowa, Nebraska on Friday. Bill Landis and Tishu will be at Ohio State, Michigan
We're going to meet
Saturday.
Up.
Yeah,
we're going to get a picture since you're bailing.
I know.
Landis and I are going to meet up, get a pic, and represent KOTN.
Photoshop me in. Can you Photoshop me in? Here, let me do this real quick. Okay, so just add that photo and just plop me in. Is your son coming?
Yes.
Okay, put your son in the photo and then put my face on his body, just like we're going to do with Ralphie and Lane Kiffin. Just tell that to your kid. Just say, hey, stand here. We got a Ralphie Doug's face onto you. He'll understand what it means. Okay. That's it. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yarosowski, for making us look good and sound good. We will see you guys on Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern for the postgame show. And we'll see you next week back here on Friday for Bets of the North. He's Tishu. I'm Doug. And that was Bets of the North on Kings of the North.